listening to the Spicy Dividend. Hello and welcome. It is Monday, March 30th. Today's my dad's birthday. He's turning 61 today. It is 5:07 p.m. Sorry I'm not going early today. I'm super busy at work and I might be this way the rest of the week. But nonetheless, we are going to try and pump out these daily podcasts. And today should be a milestone. Today I set the portfolio for the future, okay? Before we get into that, let's just discuss the markets overall. Absolutely ripping higher today. The S&P 500 is up 800 points, up 3.25%. The Dow Jones Industrial is up 675 points, up 3%. So the past 5 days, Dow Jones Industrial average is up 14%, and the S&P 500 is up 12%. So it's been a very good week for the markets, well, considering the bear market that we're in. So we're bringing back some of the old school dividend grinder. That's the original YouTube channel that I created. It was basically me just building up dividend paying stocks, a lot of the times monthly. I had a daily dividend portfolio going for a long time. We're getting back into that, but with a preference for covered calls and selling that. So if you follow me on YouTube, you knew that I was prone to changing my portfolio quite a bit. Well, mark this down. March 30th, 2020. I am setting the portfolio up for how I want it to be in the future. I am not changing it. Cross every finger that I possibly can. Cross my heart. Dot whatever I you want. I am not changing the portfolio from here on out. I made one last sale today, and it is permanently going for the change that I'm going to talk about today. First of all, we're going back to funding $30 minimum every single day. This was a dividend grinder classic. It really is what fueled my portfolio to grow really quickly. The aggressive funding, we're going back on the aggressive funding. I'm going to tone down my funding for emergencies because the emergency fund right now is it's quite substantial. 3.5 to 4 years of expenses covered. And it is going to get some interest, so it's even going to grow without me putting in anything. But I'm going to be putting in maybe like $50 a week into that. That's what my wife currently does. So if we both put in $100 a week total, $400 a month, that's fine for an emergency fund, considering we haven't touched it, except for our tax payment. And we have a lot of expenses covered, and it's only going to be getting interest. So $30 a day minimum is going into the individual portfolio. Let's get into what the portfolio is ultimately going to be. So right now, all that's in the portfolio, the only thing is 100 shares of SLV, which is silver. And then I had the covered calls going against that. Today, I sold the 100 shares of Delta, and I sold, I do have 10 shares of VNQ in there, which is Vanguard's real estate. We'll get into that in a little bit. But 10 shares of VNQ, 100 shares of silver, the covered call against silver. That's it. And then I have about, 3,000 in cash. I'm not looking at my portfolio at the top of my head. Sorry. I'm looking at what the future portfolio is going to entail. So here is the structure that I'm going to be building towards. If you follow me on Twitter, I just posted this about an hour ago. My Twitter handle is @DGenDividends, DEGEN Dividends. Down in the description below if you're on YouTube. You can follow it if you're listening on podcast in the description as well. So here is what the portfolio I am going to set out to create. 1,000 shares of DGRO, and I'm going to go into detail on each of these, so don't feel like you have to rush and scramble and listen to these. 1,000 shares of DGRO, 100 shares of IAU, 100 shares of VNQ, 100 shares VXUS, 100 shares XLU. So you notice that all of them are 100 with the exception of DGRO, which is 1,000. You can all deduce that this is increments of 100, and that's because I want to make this a covered call portfolio. So you need 100 shares to sell a covered call. And yeah, that's pretty much basics for that. Let's get into each of them. So the big one, I want to eventually grow to 1,000 shares of DGRO. DGRO is iShares Core Dividend Growth. So this is a dividend growth fund, dividend growth ETF. And when I list out the top 10 holdings here, it's going to be extremely familiar name, something that I want to build the meat of my portfolio around. And that's why it is 1,000 shares versus everything else being 100 shares. These positions, the top 10 include going from order from highest to lowest in the top 10. Microsoft, Apple, J&J, Verizon, JP Morgan, Chevron, Pfizer, Procter & Gamble, Wells Fargo, and Home Depot. So these are huge blue chip, large cap growth companies that have been growing their dividend. And yeah, this is what I want to base my portfolio around. And again, this is not changing. This is it. I'm going for 1,000 shares of it. At the end of the market today, it traded around $33. So in order to, let's just say, obviously this isn't going to happen, but theoretically, let's just say it stayed at $33 a share. In order to get 1,000 shares, I would have to spend approximately $33,000 to acquire 1,000 shares of this. Now, what's going to be cool is that, I'm going to be collecting dividends along the way to help me fund this. I'm also going to be doing some covered calls to fund it as well. And I'm going to be doing covered calls right away on it because I sold 100 shares of Delta and also the remaining one-off shares of UTX, United Technologies, which I ended up making a 30% gain on. Only had a share and a half, not a big deal. And I sold off Home Depot, which I had a share and a half, made about 20%. Only had like a share or whatever of that too. So I'm going to be buying 100 shares of DGRO tomorrow. So I have the money for it. It needed to settle in order for me to be able to trade the funds on Fidelity. So I will be having 100 shares of DGRO tomorrow. We'll be selling a covered call immediately to get some income. So that's DGRO. That is going to be the basis of the portfolio and what I'm going to be building first and foremost. That is the highest priority, to get that as high as possible. The next was 100 shares of IAU. This is iShares Gold Trust. The price of gold minus spot price. So I wanted to get gold into my portfolio. This is probably the lowest priority of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I have listed here. This is the lowest priority, is gold. But I do have silver. I want to get gold. I want to get some diversification in there. I thought gold over bonds just because, the whole point of bonds is I would consider gold kind of similar, and it's a lot better for covered calls, gold versus bonds. So I went siding on gold. But again, if I'm ranking these 5 holdings in order, priority 1 to 5, gold is definitely 5. That's IAU. Number 1 is obviously DGRO, the Core Dividend Growth Fund. The next on the list, 100 shares of VNQ. I have 10 shares of that currently. VNQ is Vanguard's real estate ETF. I love real estate. I love the higher yields that you get on real estate. And I believe real estate is very undervalued at the moment. So at the moment, VNQ is number 2 for me on the priority of 1 to 5. Which ones I want to fund as fast as possible. I want to get 100 shares of VNQ. The next one on the list, 100 shares of VXUS. This is Vanguard's international ETF, total international ETF, excluding anything from the US. This I've held in my E-Trade account for a little bit. VXUS has a ton of holdings. I'm talking well over 5,000 different holdings, all international, no US companies included. So this one is for the global play. So I want to get in there. So as you can see, I'm trying to make this portfolio quite diversified, more so than just dividends and dividends only. So we're going to have the dividend growth as the core. We're also going to have silver, gold, and international. So this is something that I wanted to make a priority. This is why I constructed the portfolio this way. I want to make sure that I'm getting diversification any way possible. So in terms of priority, I put this one at number 4. Just because everything's a little shaky right now. I don't know if I want to be going international at the moment. There's a lot of uncertainty. Who knows what data China made up, how India is going to be affected, which is a huge emerging market. The UK just started to get infected with all this stuff. You see how bad Spain, France, and Italy are doing. Germany's getting hammered right now as well. So, and obviously, holdings like this are very dependent on Europe. A decent chunk to China, a decent chunk to India, but they're heavy weighted in Europe. So this stuff is just ramping up in Europe. Not sure I want to be buying right now. It might be cheaper. You could argue it's cheaper, but at the same time, you want quality along with the cheapness. And I don't know if you're going to quality, as much quality internationally as you are with the U.S. Nonetheless, that's number 4. It's ahead of gold. And right in the middle at number 3 in the priority list, I want 100 shares of XLU. This is the utilities Select Sector Fund. This is one of the Spider Sector funds. Utility Select Spider Sector Fund. So top holdings include NextEra Energy, Duke Energy, Dominion Energy, Southern American Electric Power Company. So these are also big names in the energy field, utilities field, the power field, however you want to call it, electricity and natural gas. But that is in the middle. So I'm going to be funding this aggressively again, kind of going back to the old ways. But, I don't want to make videos again just because I'm going to be doing the same 5 holdings and just grinding them out, trying to make as much income along the way as possible by doing covered calls and by doing receiving some dividends along the way. Now, keep in mind, it's going to be difficult because I'm not going to be able to do covered calls on anything except for the 100 shares of DGRO that I'm going to buy tomorrow. I have the covered call on silver, but don't forget that expires in December 31st. So, obviously I'm not going to be making any more income on that until it expires that day where I could sell a new one. But that one was just kind of like a get my feet wet, get diversification in the portfolio with silver, while also just trying a beginner's version of a covered call. And silver is definitely a beginner's version. There's not much volume in the options. You're not going to be trading weeklies with silver. There's just not enough money to be made. It doesn't make much sense. But DGRO can absolutely sell some covered calls. The reason I went with DGRO versus something like a VOO or a VIG, it's just price point. The whole purpose of this, besides just getting the dividend income, is to build the cash flow through covered calls. And it's one of the cheapest, highest quality funds that I could find. And it's iShares. And iShares is known for very good ETFs. Probably I would rank iShares second behind Vanguard in terms of ETF quality. So you're getting a very good brand name with iShares. The holdings, they check out Microsoft, Apple, J&J. What more could you want in blue chips? So high quality fund. Can trade some weeklies on this one, mostly monthlies. You're mostly going to be trading monthlies on ETFs, but you may be able to sneak in some weeklies here and there. But I'm looking forward to selling some covered calls on that. But I'm only going to be able to sell one contract, one covered call. So the covered call aspect of this portfolio, even though it's based for covered calls, it's going to take a little bit of time for me to really get that income generated. So I'm funding it aggressively again. I'm making it very conservative for my kind of taste right now. I was very aggressive, obviously, before I blew up my account. And by the way, don't forget, people seem to be misinterpreting. I did take $30,000 straight cash, homie, out of the portfolio into our emergency fund. So it's not like I lost all that money. I didn't, okay? Even if you just take the salvage value of $30,000, that just means that I lost 30 out of 50, so 40% of my portfolio, which is, a lot of people on YouTube, I'm looking at their portfolios, they lost a lot more than 40% in some cases. So, it's really not as big of a deal as some people are making it. I made the podcast episode yesterday, and of course you're going to get bombarded with comments on YouTube of people thinking they are financial gurus, and it's like, oh, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? Why are you gambling? Why are you gambling? It's like, I'm fully acknowledging that I gambled. And if I'm fully acknowledging that I'm gambling, it means in the back of my mind, I know this is a stupid move. So why are you lecturing me that's a stupid move? I'm full on frontally admitting to you it was stupid. And I know it's stupid. Doing it, I knew it was stupid. You don't have to lecture me on why it's stupid if I already knew that. But, that's when you put yourself out there and you put your moves out there, it's just natural criticism that's going to come, especially in the finance community. Everyone thinks they're right. Everyone thinks that they have a perfect plan, yet, only 1% of them are brave enough to actually show their portfolio and show their moves. So here are my moves. Again, you can see it on Twitter if you want a text recap, but 1,000 shares DGRO, the core dividend growth, 100 shares of the gold trust, 100 shares of Vanguard's real estate ETF, 100 shares of Vanguard's international ETF, and 100 shares of the Spider Utility Select Sector Fund. So, it might be pretty monotonous and boring, but hey, I am not changing. I swear to whatever God you believe in, I am not changing anything. And I promise. So if I start doing some daily purchases, you're just going to see the same 5 going over and over. But like I said, gold is probably a low priority, so I'll probably be buying let's just say I only do $30 every single day. At least 20 is going to go to DGRO every single day. And then I'll split probably 3, 3, and 3 to VNQ, VXUS, and XLU. So interesting stuff ahead. But this is what I need. I needed structure. And a lot of people just need the structure, and then I can just fund appropriately, let it go, wait till I get 100 shares of something, and then start selling covered calls, making dual income between the covered calls and the dividends. Look, worst case scenarios, I work so hard to get 100 shares of something, and then it gets exercised through a covered call. But don't forget, I'm always going to be setting the strike price above what I paid for. So if I do end up losing, well, the game is all about total return, so that means I just made money on the position anyway. So hope you follow along the journey. Aggressive funding coming once again, a minimum $30 a day. Let me know if you want me to post the purchases every single day on Twitter. I can do that. That's not a big deal. It doesn't take that long. Let me know in the comments on YouTube, and you can let me know on Twitter if you're following on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, wherever it is you're listening. Thank you so much for giving my voice an ear. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.